pleasure to be here at the assembly once again to bring the word of Yahweh. It's an honor and a blessing to be given the opportunity to share some deep things concerning Yahweh's word with his people. You know, it's written that it's a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living Elohim. And the other night on our live program, I said, and just the same, it should be a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the teacher of Elohim. In other words, if you fall into the hands of the shepherd that is truly shepherding Yahweh's flock, and it's a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living Elohim, then his messengers should also have a message of not only acquittal, but provision and determination to meet the mark of that acquittal. And to exercise that from a position of being a teacher sometimes is not an easy job. So sometimes things that we might say or do will rub certain people wrong. And again, the intention of all of our messages as seekers of Yahweh, and coming from all of the elders as well, is never to offend, but again, defend. And in Yahweh's defense, continuing today, this message is one of the deepest messages I believe that Yahweh has ever revealed to me. And when I say deep, I mean in a way that brings a sense of urgency to the body. Urgency. People will ask sometimes, again, those of you that have seen me on social media know that when I'm teaching on social media, it's a little bit more like hardball. You know, Teddy Wilson has his game face on, and I speak a little differently, and I speak, straight shooter, you know, because social media is the stomping grounds of Satan. And if we don't shut his mouth up, he will deceive even the very elect. And we can't have that. Because Yahweh elected you. Yahweh elected us. And for us to sit back and allow these false teachings on social media and in the world abroad, and us not say anything against it, is tyranny against the king. Because we represent him and we've been appointed by him. So first and foremost, to love Yahweh and represent him as an ambassador and someone who is appointed to that realm, you have to first love him, and you must first execute his word. If we haven't done that, it doesn't matter how much I say I love you. I can love you as we both go straight to the grave. But in the end, if I have not honored Yah, I just might stay in the grave another 1,000 years when everybody else is going and having a wonderful time in the first resurrection of the dead. So, having said that, this is a very, very important teaching. If any of you want, I don't know if they're recording and making DVDs available here, but if not, I have these two teachings on DVD when we first recorded them at the assembly in Idaho, and would be more than willing to send you copies. If you want to help out with the postage and stuff like that, we've got them. It's that important. We will give them away for free. You know, these messages are not to be taken lightly, and it's something that we want. It's like the community awareness. In order for the community of Yahweh to remain safe from the evil one, we must raise the awareness of the wiles of the devil. The wiles of the one who wants to steal, kill, and destroy what Yahweh has given us. Syncretic worship has never, will never be accepted in Yahweh's kingdom. So share this one with your pastor. Share this one with the pastors in your community. because there is something on the wise. We're living quite possibly not only in the end times, but in the last generation. So, with that said, let's go ahead and pray. And we'll be getting into this syncretism not allowed in Yahweh's kingdom. Almighty Yahweh, we, your people, once again come to you just seeking knowledge and wisdom, peace and shalom between us and you. Give us not the type of peace or shalom that the world offers us, but that which you offer. Let your word come forth in authority and truth. Let our love for you and your love for us be manifest in the body of Messiah. Help us, Father, to understand. Help us to ascertain these deep things concerning what you do and do not allow in your realm. Your word says to bury our excretion outside of the camp, because you are holy and you walk in the midst of Israel. So we pray that you would reveal to us what that is that needs to be buried, so that you can walk in the midst of us. We give you the praise and we ask for your guidance. Lead us through the Ruach HaKodesh as we begin to study once again today, your seventh day. As we gather, we mikra, come together to search for you, to seek you out, so that we can be better servants. In the mighty name of Yeshua, hallelujah, and amen.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Okay. So the points in this study, we're going to be defining syncretism, because how many people in the assembly today can say they know the definition of syncretism? See, that's what I mean. We really need to define these things that Yahweh hates. Because a lot of times the Bible doesn't clearly say, hey, I hate this. We know that it says that Yahweh loved Jacob and hated Esau. You know, we know that sometimes there's things in there that that we really need to define, because it was meant to define itself. In other words, it's an unspoken rule. You should know this type of verbiage. All right? So we're going to be defining syncretism. And we're also going to be focusing on how church religions have labeled yet looked past the syncretism in their own faith. We're also going to be looking at what religions were integrated into our Western mindset and accepted as truth. Because there's a huge difference between an Eastern mind and a Western mind. Earlier I described one of those differences in describing this picture where Yahweh's name is over here. And that is relevant all throughout Scripture, because in Western mind has translated that Eastern author's intention into our English Bibles. All right? And last but not least, we're going to be looking at scriptural proof that Yahweh has never, nor will he ever, allow syncretism or syncretic worship in his house. Now, how many times did the children of Israel get thrown out of the house? Quite a few, haven't they? And I can guarantee you, every time it had something to do with syncretic worship. So what makes us think that we're going to still be wrapped up in syncretic worship and him let us back into the house? He sent us out here to learn. He sent us out here to be stationary, to not proceed forward in the house, but to fight for our way back into the house. How many of us struggle in our walks? It's a struggle. But boy, could you imagine when they followed Joshua bin Nun, they went into the kingdom. Oh, hallelujah. Boy, look at the size of them grapes.
Nobody's
And
righteous.
later on, them grapes did something to them that they never thought possible. In other words, it can be sweet to the taste, but very bitter to the stomach. Holding on to what Yahweh has given us is the objective. And not to allow syncretism into your heart, into your mind, and into your worship is the way to hold on to what He has given you. Okay. So normally, this has been one of my new go-tos over the past, maybe 3 or 4 years, to look for Christian theology and the way that the Christians are beginning to confront certain things, and they actually have confronted syncretism even from a church point of view. And so I found this website, gotquestions.org, and there is so much information from a Christian theologian on this page. He covers almost everything. So this has been my go-to. This is what this Christian theologian says about syncretism. Syncretism, as defined by the American Heritage Dictionary, is the reconciliation or fusing of differing systems of belief. So it's the putting together of a couple of different belief systems into one. All right? This is most evident in the areas of philosophy and religion. And if you have a pastor that took philosophy in college, you're already going swimming upstream. Because he's already going to have a certain approach, a philosophical approach at the Scriptures. All right? And it usually results in a new teaching or belief system. Obviously, this cannot be reconciled to biblical Christianity, he said. Now, what we're going to see is biblical Christianity is not Christianity at all. The true faith of the first century apostles was never Christianity. And the true faith of Israel was never Judaism. It was Torah. Religious syncretism often takes place when foreign beliefs are introduced into an indigenous belief system and the teachings are blended. The new heterogeneous religion then takes a shape of its own. So where did Christianity come from? Catholicism. Okay? The new heterogeneous, that is very important. Let's read that again. The new heterogeneous religion then takes a shape of its own. This has been seen most clearly in Roman Catholic missionary history. Now remember, this is being written by a Christian theologian. Take, for example, the Roman Catholic Church's proselytizing of animistic South America. Threatened with the fear of death, natives were baptized into the church by tens of thousands without any preaching of the gospel whatsoever. This is documented history. Former temples were razed, with Catholic shrines and chapels built on the same spot. Natives were allowed to substitute praying to saints instead of their gods of water, earth, and air, and replace their former idols with the new image of the Roman Catholic Church. You see, so this is how it began in the early realms of what we now know as Catholicism. And again, the daughters of Catholicism came through the Protestant church. Now that's the seed spoken about, the daughters, of course, of the harlot, spoken about in the book of Revelation. Okay? It says, yet the animistic religion the natives had formerly practiced was never fully replaced. What did Yahweh say to do in the Torah? You're going to go into this land, you're going to dispossess the people, you're going to tear down the shrines, you're going to tear down their idols, and you're not going to worship me like they worship their mighty ones. Right? So when we see things mixing together, beware. And again, we know that God, LORD, JC, and all of these things are connected to some not so good areas. Should we, rightfully, as elders, allow that stuff to be spoken from behind this beam? Okay, so you see where I'm going with this. Okay, you can bring people in with the true message and the true names. But this is a different realm. Yahweh is going to appoint people to speak from behind this thing that has the ability to change your thinking and deprogram the syncretary measures that have been instilled in your mind for decades. You must deprogram before you reprogram the mind of a human being. You have to, you must. And it's hard. I remember when I first started using it, I said, I'm not using no other names or titles anymore. I'd be walking along, and I just say, somebody say, hey, you know, God bless you. And I go, God bless you. And I make myself go down and do 20 push-ups. Every time, no matter where I was at. And that got embarrassing. Yet the animistic religion the natives had formerly practiced was never fully replaced. Do you see what this is saying? If we don't fully replace what we came into the truth with, we are still syncretic in our thoughts. To purge these things is what we need to practice on. Amen. Hallelujah. To purge them. Not to say, hey, you stay outside until you can't say God anymore. No, you sit right there and listen to me say Yahweh this whole service. And pretty soon, if you show up here Shabbat after Shabbat and they sing and sing and sing and sing Yahweh, Yahshua, Yahweh, pretty soon it's going to just disappear. Because you're purging out the old and coming in with the new. It's not something that just comes naturally. What came naturally was the deception. Right? It was adapted into Catholic teachings, and this new belief system was allowed to flourish. Everyone, are you allowing something to flourish within you? It should not be there. What we should do is allow the truth of Yahweh in all realms flourish within us. Then it will flow from you. Once you are filled up with it, it will pour from you like rivers of living water. Hallelujah. He promises it. Okay? Yeah. Oh, skip one. Threatened with the fear of death, the natives were baptized until we already read that one, right?
Yes.
And skipped one on me. Right. More recently, he concludes here, religious syncretism can be seen in such religious systems as the New Age. Notice he doesn't use Christianity. He put the New Age. Because most Christian fellowships aren't recognizing the New Age Christian movement. So he's actually hiding something there when he uses the terminology New Age. Okay? Hinduism, Unitarianism, and Christian Science, he really cherry picks here in defining this. These religions are a blending of multiple different belief systems and are continually evolving as the philosophies of mankind rise and fall in popularity. Therein lies the problem, For syncretism relies on the whim of man, not the standard of Scripture. The Bible makes it very clear what true religion is, and with that last statement, I am in total agreement with. The Scriptures say what true religion is. It says that Yahweh has a religion, and that religion is true and undefiled. It's undefiled. It's not syncretic. There's no additives, no preservatives. It's grandmother's recipe for cornbread. Don't change it, because it won't be as sweet as Grandma made. Okay? You add to it or take away from it, it changes the flavor and the essence of the message. Now, what I want to do is give plenty of scriptural support for moving into this very important topic. So we're going to be reading several scriptures here. Deuteronomy 12 is where we're going to begin. Verses 28 through 32. Guard and obey all these words which I command you, that it might be well with you and your children after you forever. When you do what is good and right in the eyes of Yahweh your Elohim, when Yahweh your Elohim does cut off from before you the nations, what is he doing? He's cutting off the nations before you and everything that was in them. All right? Which you go to dispossess, and you dispossess them and dwell in their land. Guard yourself, that you are not ensnared to follow them after they are destroyed from before you, and that you do not inquire about their mighty ones, saying, how did these nations serve their mighty ones? What he's specifically saying here, don't you let any type of syncretism come into the family as we go in to possess the land. You are my family. We are his family. And I cannot stand by in idle as I see idolatry infiltrate the body of Yahshua in and around our assemblies. He said, be careful. Don't let it happen. We need to start putting up our hands and saying, only this far. Right? There's only so far we can go with this. We've got to work on these people. We've got to pray for these people. We've got to work with these people. But when it comes to a certain realm, there's a place where we have to say, you know, there's only so far we can go. Specifically, Yahweh's words. How did these nations serve their mighty ones, and let me do so too? Do not do so to Yahweh your Elohim, for every abomination which Yahweh hates they have done to their mighty ones, for they even burnt their sons and daughters in the fire to their mighty ones. All the words which I am commanding you, guard to do it. Do not add to it or take away from it. Do you see what he's saying? You keep yourself unspotted from anything that has to do with world religions. We're going in, and he's going to dispossess the kings of the earth, just like he did for our father Abraham. We're reading that earlier today. We're going in, and we're going to dispossess the kings of this world, and we're going to set up the reign of Yahshua. Come on. And we cannot allow the infiltration of the enemy back into the camp. Okay? Now, Also, let's go to Exodus 20. This is a big one because this is in the marriage covenant, given at Mount Sinai. The first 3 verses there. Shemot, or Exodus, chapter 20, verses 1 through 3. And Elohim spoke all these words, saying. Now, who spoke this? Yahweh did. I am Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim. Has anybody brought you out of the world lately, everyone? Did he not bring you out of the world? Did he not bring you out of bondage and slavery? Listen to this. Listen. Out of the house of slavery, verse 3. You have no other mighty ones against my face. These are stipulations on how to keep syncretic, a mixture of worship coming into the fold. Now, of course, we've got to go out and we've got to seek the sheep and minister to the sheep and feed the sheep, and they will know, they will hear his voice and know that we are messengers of Yahweh. Because when they start grazing in the pastures that we lead them to, it will be sufficient. They're going to go, this is the type of grass I have not grazed on since I was a baby. The best way that we can do that as representatives of Yahweh is to give them the pure, unadulterated milk of the Word. And this is a very, I was speaking to someone earlier, the simplicity of the complexity of Yahweh's words is so enormous. It's so complex, it's almost simple. And we've read over these passages how many times, and we've never connected the dots. But there is simplicity if you understand what he's saying. Don't mix things up. I want grandma's cornbread. I know my precious mom, bless her heart, we were having Brad Scott to speak at he was coming to, we were doing a conference in Lewiston, Idaho, and we had heard Brad during one of his teachings talk about his grandmother's cornbread. And how nobody can make cornbread like his grandmother. So my mom stepped out there, bless her heart, and she cooked some cornbread. Brad wouldn't eat it. And she was like, how come you wouldn't eat my cornbread? I said, okay, so what's the right recipe, Mom? I don't know. It's one of those things to where, yeah, there's something that just can't be replaced. You know that you've tried and tried to find it again, but since Grandma left, you can't find that type of taste anywhere in anybody's cornbread, and you just give up trying. The original recipe is at rest. That's what happened when Yahweh gave us these words. It's that way or no way. He's a king. He is the king of all creation. He deserves the best. That's why we are a special people, a peculiar people. We're special to him, the elect of Yahweh. Now, also we want to look at Exodus 23:13, and that's a big one, because again, this is not only with the way they worship, but in the names that they worship him. Shemot chapter 23 verse 13 says, and in all that I have said to you, take heed. And Yahweh just spoke a lot. Yahweh spoke a lot of words by the time we get here. And he says, in all that I have said to you, take heed, and make no mention of the name of other mighty ones, let it not be heard from your mouth. Yeah. Specifically going into the land, what are we going to be doing in the land? We're going to be praising Yahweh. We're going to be exalting Yahweh. There is no other terminology other than all the names and titles that were ordained from the heavens going to be coming out of our mouth when we go into the land. I can tell you this right now with a surety. In the Shemayim, in the heavens, there has never been any other names other than the ones that were breathed through the prophets and the apostles used in worship towards Yah in the heavens. And I must say it again. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Right? Let thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Do we see the big picture here? He's trying to say, I want you, here's the pattern. This is the recipe. This is the way I want it. Then we want to go to Joshua chapter 23. Verses 6 through 13. And you shall be very strong to guard and do all that is written in the book of the Torah of Moshe, so as not to turn aside from it right or left. Now, what I would like to point out here, notice that this has to do with Joshua. It's a foreshadow of those who would go into the kingdom with Joshua. And what is he saying here? Same stipulations apply. Are you following me? The same stipulations. Remember, the word or I got to settle down. I want to make a very, very important connection here. So we have Moshe, and the word that Yahweh spoke through Moshe brought them so far. It brought them to the point, Moshe brought them to the point to where then Joshua would lead them into the nation. But the word that was spoken by Yahweh through Moshe only brought them so far. Then it took Yahshua to lead them into the land. And the same stipulations apply according to this passage. It is a foreshadow of the coming of Yahshua. To do all that is written in the book of the Torah of Moshe, so as not to turn aside from it right or left. Verse 7. So as to not go in among these nations, these who remain among you. Now remember, they went to go into the land once, and they were turned around because of their disobedience to Yahweh's word and the building of the golden calf. So they didn't go in. This is a picture of the second time they came, and were about to go in. Yahshua came once, he's preparing us, and when he comes back, what's he going to do? He's going to take us into the land. Hallelujah. Praise God. All right. And picking up there in verse 7 once again, and make no mention of the name of their mighty ones, nor swear by them, nor serve them, nor bow down to them. But cling to Yahweh your Elohim, as you have done to this day. For Yahweh has driven out from before you great and strong nations. As for you, no one has stood against you to this day. One man of you put 1,000 to flight. For Yahweh your Elohim is he who is fighting for you, as he has promised you. Verse 11. And you shall diligently guard yourselves to love Yahweh your Elohim. See what he's doing? He's connecting the way he says, this is how I want you to show me that you love me. Don't let anything else in our relationship. It's intimacy that he wants. Don't we understand? It's intimacy as a husband with the bride. He wants intimacy. He wants us to love him and only him, and to serve him the way that he said to be served. I mean, you may think that it sounds, when he's giving us these words, you may think that it sounds like he's being demanding. No, he's saying, this is how I want you to love me. This is the most beautiful love story that you can ever read if you can look past all of the death and sin and crookedness, because it wasn't him that produced the death, the sin, and the crookedness. It was us. And he still yet called us to his kingdom and called us to his side. I know people now. You did what? Oh, no, you didn't. You leave it. Very few families out there today are not made up of somebody who's been raised in a family that was dysfunctional. You know what I mean? We have all of these terrible things because we don't know the love of Yah. If you go to mix something in your relationship that one or the other does not want in it, you'll see how long it lasts. It just won't last. You can bat an eye at things for a certain time, but pretty soon somebody's going to say something or do something that you just can't accept. And it's always going to create problems. So this is actually a preventative measure. Hallelujah. It's a preventative measure to keep the relationship intact. And I say that with love. Honestly. Verse 12, but if you turn back at all and cling to the remnant of these nations, these that remain among you, and intermarry with them, see, there's that, you're bringing in a third party, and go into them, and they do you, know for certain that Yahweh your Elohim shall no longer drive these nations out before you, and they shall be snares and traps to you, and a whip on your sides, and thorns in your eyes, until you perish from the good land which Yahweh your Elohim has given you. So there's the penalty. Going to remove you from the land, from the house. So I think that it would really behoove us, if you will, to find out what really caused them to be cast out of the house, because we're trying to get back in it. Because we are a remnant of those who were cast out. Joshua 24. Hallelujah. (14 through 16). And now fear Yahweh, serve him in perfection. Serve him in perfection and in truth, and put away the mighty ones which your father served beyond the river and in Mitzrayim, and serve Yahweh. And if it seems evil in your eyes to serve Yahweh, choose for yourself this day whom you are going to serve, whether the mighty ones which your father served that were beyond the river, or the mighty ones of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But I and my house, we serve Yahweh.
Hallelujah. Hey. Did you call for 16?
Yeah. In verse 16, and the people answered and said, far be it from us to forsake Yahweh to serve other mighty ones. Now we know that after Joshua left, there was a few elders left that kept teaching the truth, but pretty soon, it fell apart. Judges chapter 2, Shaphatim. Verses 7 through 13. And the people served Yahweh all the days of Yahushua, and all the days of the elders who outlived Yahushua, who had seen all the great works of Yahweh, which he had done for Israel. And Yahushua, son of Nun, the servant of Yahweh, died 110 years old. And they buried him within the border of his inheritance in Timnath-Heres, in the mountains of Ephraim, on the north side of Mount Nahash. And all that generation were likewise gathered to their fathers, and another generation arose after them who did not know Yahweh, nor the work which he had done for Israel. Do you see what we're... Look at this. Why am I concerned that these types of teachings are no longer coming forth from the groups of people that we are affiliated with? Because we're not going to cause our seed to remember the severity of this covenant. We do need to teach them the love and the mercy and the grace and the faith behind it all. But we also need to make sure they understand the consequences of intermingling and bringing stuff into the covenant that Yahweh will not have. It's on the same token. We are teaching the love and the faith and the grace very, very avidly. And again, we need that. I'm not negating that at all. But what I'm saying is, he is specifically saying you cannot go into the land or remain in the land if you do this. And we're not really focusing on that these days. Excuse me. All right, so picking up in verse 11, the children of Israel did evil in the eyes of Yahweh. Excuse me. And served the Baals. And what did we just see up here on the screen? The Baal means Lord. Right, okay? So they begin to serve Baal and forsook Yahweh Elohim of their fathers who had brought them out of the land of Mitzrayim, and went after other mighty ones, of the mighty ones of the people who were all around them, and they bowed down to them and provoked Yahweh. So they forsook Yahweh and served Baal and the Asherites. So here you see Yahweh constantly warning through his word, and what happens after the men of Yahweh stopped teaching the generation that was to come after them the severity of syncretism? What happened? They started doing it and they lost the land. You know, Israel, we've lost enough. I don't want to lose anymore. Yeshua said that he made us victorious. We should be teaching our children the things that will exclude them from being eligible to go into the millennial reign with Yeshua. We really need to be educating them. And that begins here, in this room, with us. We can honestly say, when we've taught them about the love and the mercy and the grace and the faith in the body of Yeshua, and we teach them the do's and the don'ts in the body of Yeshua, we can honestly look our Father in the eye and say, if my son or daughter got disobedient, it wasn't for the lack of me teaching them right. We have to stand before him accountable. And you are accountable for your family and the elders in the assemblies, and the people of the assemblies are also accountable for one another. There is accountability.
Be wishy-washy.
Yeah, right. So we have to keep the accountability. We have to keep the accountability to a certain level. And Yahweh hates syncretism. He does not like a mixture of these things. All right? Now, so these passages show one infallible truth. And notice that we weren't just cherry picking a verse here and there and then combining them together and formulating some theses. We read a lot of passages here that were dealing with the same exact context. Okay? So these passages show one infallible truth. As long as Yahweh's people were doing what was spoken through Moshe and following Yahshua in the land, they would remain eligible to stay in the kingdom. Yet they began to get involved in syncretic worship by the mixing with the religions of the nations, and that is what takes away our right to the land of promise. In other words, we don't have the right to the land that we were thrown out of if we still have syncretism in our worship, which has names of idolatry, is the number one thing that he addressed, and then also learning the ways of the world. And that's why I totally disagree with a lot of the things some of the people are teaching today, as in, well, you got to understand that, you know, the world today isn't the world that it was yesterday. You're darn right. We can take a look around us, and the generation that Elder Graham grew up in, and the generation that some of these children in the room are growing up in, the difference is enormous. The moral decay of our communities is on the rise. And so we allow the next generation to be a little syncretic, but we still try to teach them the truth. You know, we have to be very careful. So, let's uncover all of this. We have some scriptural testimony on how Yahweh feels about syncretism. All right? So, in the beginning, Yahweh was in covenant with Adam and Hawa, Adam and Eve. Okay, so that's what we're talking about now, is Adam and Eve. Seed was to be born on the earth through them for Yahweh. Now, I want to clarify what I mean there. When Adam and Hawa were created, he said it's not good for a man to be alone. Why? Because Yahweh alone created the heaven and the earth. And he said, hey, it's not good for a man to be alone. The whole thing that Yahweh, the whole reason behind Yahweh creating is that there could be a family. It's not good to be alone. It's not. Then you need family on social media instead. Which I'm there, we're there. We can love each other on the phone, but there's nothing like being able to do what took place here after the first part of the service. The Holy Spirit was moving, there was tears, there was anointing, that type of stuff. You can't do that over the phone. You can pray over the phone, but there's nothing like having the Holy Spirit present and moving physically within us. So, seed was to be born on earth through them for Yahweh. And what I mean by that is, Yahweh created Adam, and then he took from his side the wife, but then he said the two become one flesh. Why? Because that was his bride. And that bride, that thing, the group that he created on the earth through Adam and Hawa was going to bear seed for him. All of the seed that was going to be brought forth on this earth was for Yahweh, because they were created in his image. Okay, not until the fall did they begin to take on the image of, Genesis chapter 5 tells us that they begin to take on the image of Adam. Okay, so as they were covered in his light, that they may produce seed in his image, children of light. So that's what happens now. Now we're children of the light. That's a scriptural title of what we are now in the body of Messiah. This little light mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Hallelujah. You know, we've got the light again. We're covered in the light. Hallelujah. Praise God. All right, so here we see what caused them to be uncovered, naked, was the mixing of seeds or words, and that's syncretic. So what am I saying? I'm saying that originally we only had one seed within us. And that was the Word of Yah, which created us. Everything was created through the Spirit by the Word. Amen. Correct? Amen. Hallelujah. That seed that was within us was compromised when Eve or Hawa went, and she received the word, which is a seed of the adversary, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. She accepted that seed. And now we have the seed of knowledge of good and evil within us. Now we're born with a syncretic nature. Everybody, please understand what I'm saying. Now we are born with a syncretic nature, and it's easy for us to be deceived because we are listening to this nature go, you know better than to do that. And this little nature says, oh, come on, we can do it just once. Tell me it's not true. It's there. It's in every one of us. Seeds, words being planted in your ears is the way that it worked then, and it still works now. Father, help us. So let's read Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. Bereshit 3, verses 1 through 6. This is what we're dealing with. And the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field which Yahweh Elohim had made. And he said to the woman, is it true that Elohim has said, do not eat of every tree of the garden? So notice that the conversation isn't what killed us. Because we have the ability to fight this just as Joshua did. He said, depart from me, for it is written. For it is written. Okay, so it's not the conversation between the two seeds that gets us. It's the acceptance of that word that causes us to doubt, and then we fall into a different realm in the eyes of Yahweh. It's disobedient. Is it true that Elohim has said, do not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, we are to eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, Elohim has said, do not eat of it, nor touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said to the woman, you shall certainly not die. For Elohim knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be like Elohim. Guess what? He just lied, and she's about to bite. She was already in the image of Elohim, but she didn't know it. They were just created. They were programmed to just do what Yahweh wanted them to do, and that's to produce seed. Are we not supposed to be producing fruits of the Spirit? That's that same seed planted within them that was going to bear fruit fit for the King. And you can't do that by receiving other ingredients into the recipe. Again in verse 5, for Elohim knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be like Elohim, knowing good and evil. And the woman saw. See, this is what happened. She let the word penetrate her mind. And then the revelation, something that she was not supposed to see, she saw. And what did it do? It took her light. It took her covering. It took her protection. And now she was susceptible. And instead of Adam, the man of Yahweh, standing up and saying, whoa, we've got a problem. Father, how do we fix this? He too submitted. And that was the end of that part of the game. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took from its fruit and ate, and she also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. So you see, she received another word, another seed. And now we have a syncretic nature within us from our very youth. And it's evil and wicked. The heart of man is evil and wicked even from its youth. So we don't have to teach our babies to be obedient anymore. Or excuse me, to be disobedient. I wish my 10-month-old was that easy. But we have to teach our children to be obedient. I said, no, son, don't touch that. And what's he doing the whole time? You know? In the beginning, the seed that was to be born would have not known what disobedience was. Amen? So here we see that this syncretism is something that is naturally implanted into us from our very youth. So now it becomes this. What are you going to allow to be nurtured within you and within those around you and within the body of Messiah? What seed are we going to water? Are we going to say, oh no, you're not planting that in my garden? Are we going to say, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to accept that poison here. Hallelujah. So what we see here is the mixing of two seeds or words. And the word, this is some very important information. That word where it says that the enemy said, in that passage is the Hebrew number 559, Amar, and is the same word used in chapter 1 when Yahweh said, let there be light. So it's the same exact word that was spoken. Yahweh was planting seed when he created, was he not? Let it be, let this be, let that, and it was. Things came to be. Things were generated. So that same Hebrew word, when Yahweh said, let there be, also is the same word used whenever Satan said, hey, I got a word for you. Then they knew they were naked. Now, uncovered and nakedness. Now, notice what this syncretism produced. It produced it. That's that English grammatical error I make every now and then while I'm up here. So it produced something that what? Caused them to lose their covering. It was syncretic. Ezekiel chapter 16. And why we're going through this is because it is a continual problem since the fall in the garden. It's a continual problem that Yahweh battles with us on a daily basis. We've seen it in the garden. We've seen it in the Torah. Now we're going to see it in the prophets. Ezekiel 16 verses 36 through 38. Thus saith the Master Yahweh, because your copper was poured out and your nakedness uncovered. There's that word. In your whorings with your lovers, and with the idols of your abominations, and because of the blood of your children, which you have gave them. Therefore, see, I am gathering all your lovers with whom you took pleasure, and all those who you loved, with all those who you hated. And I shall gather them from all around against you, and shall uncover your nakedness to them, and they shall see all of your nakedness. And I shall judge you with the judgments of an adulteress and shedders of blood. We were speaking about this last night at the dinner table. This whole shedding of the blood and the witnesses and its purpose. Can a maiden produce blood? Yes. at conception, when she conceives for the first time and receives her husband, there's going to be bloodshed. And that's a testimony. Okay, now look. Now we can't bear that testimony because we've already spilled blood everywhere else. In verse 38, it says, "And I shall judge you with the judgments of an adulteress and shedders of blood, and I shall bring on you the blood of wrath and jealousy." So what we're seeing is that syncretism of Yahweh's creation did not stop in the garden. It has continued. Nakedness is Hebrew number 6172, and it's erva is the Hebrew word. And it means, in your Strong's it says nudity, especially the pudenda. Uh-oh, you've been exposed. Do we understand what was exposed here? The place of conception, the place of birthing, and everything else. Do we understand what syncretism does? It takes away the birthright. Do you understand that? It takes away the birthright. The birthright no longer belonged to Yahweh because the blood was spilled before they consummated the marriage at Mount Sinai. So now he has to reiterate the birthright through what? Death, burial, and resurrection. All because of our syncretic worship. All because of our nature. Yahweh has fixed it in Messiah, in Yahshua. Now, going to the ancient Hebrew here, we pick up some even greater information. So there you see it was the pudenda, it's exposed, and it's a disgrace or a blemish or shameful. And there you see arva in ancient Hebrew. There's the ayin, which means to look upon. It's a picture of an eye. To look upon, gain knowledge of. That's what you do with the eye, is you gain knowledge of something. And I would also like to point out that that word know, like or knew. Adam knew Eve, his wife. It means to be intimate with. To look upon in the way that only you and your spouse look upon one another. Okay, it's the intimacy behind it all. And syncretic, a third party is not allowed. And then the resh is a picture of the head. And then we have the wah. Anciently, it's a picture of a nail or a tent peg, and it means to fasten or secure or add. And then we have the wah there, which is a little picture of a man with his arms raised and praising, to receive a revelation or to give thanks. Okay? And in the ancient Hebrew lexicon, it gives this definition: nakedness, Hebrew and Aramaic, shame. So this syncretism has caused us to be shamed in the eyes of Yah. So we could not walk up to him with our head raised shamelessly. Because we now have been revealed our dirt. We know that we have done wrong. We know that we committed adultery. And we know that we could not be his one and only. So what does he have to do? Again, as we went over last night, Romans chapter 7 says, "Know ye, brothers," I speak to those who know the law. Yeah, I speak to those who know the law, that a woman is bound by law to her husband as long as he liveth. And there we got a problem. Because we had already said I do at Mount Sinai. Alright, we already said I do. So a betrothal, you're already husband and wife. And we know that, of course, by other testimony in the New Testament, where the angel had to come to Joseph and say, "Do not be afraid to take unto thyself Mary thy wife." But see, they hadn't actually been through the marriage ketubah yet. They were only betrothed, but they were already considered husband and wife because the contract had already been put together by the families. We said I do at Mount Sinai, but then while everything's getting signed off up there on the mountain between the mediator, the bride, and the husband, we would go ahead and committed adultery. So now we can't produce the blood that will secure the covenant. And now we're bound in covenant as long, because Yahweh lives forever. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now we're bound by law to Yahweh. Yahweh is bound to us. And now, because of what was written in the book of Leviticus, that if a man and a woman is caught in adultery, the man and the woman shall surely be stoned to death. So now he had to kill us with a rock. Whoops. He had to kill us with a rock. And I submit to you, these are my words. That rock was Messiah. He's a stone in which the builders rejected. So, in Messiah, was not the Spirit of Yahweh in Messiah? He said, know ye not that the Father is in me and I am in the Father? So the Spirit of Yahweh got in there. He was in Messiah, and that flesh died. And he appointed the woman to die because of her adultery, but then he said, your dead shall live together with my dead body, they shall rise. So he killed us with the rock, which was Messiah, and now we're going to be buried with him in baptism and risen again with him in new life. Hallelujah. Then we can proceed with the original marriage covenant that took place at Mount Sinai, and the book of Revelation says there's going to be what? A marriage supper of the Lamb. He produced the blood that we couldn't, to show that the covenant was indeed consummated. And he showed us that by the passing between the pieces that we read about today in our Torah readings. Yahweh passed through that, through the pieces, or was that this morning or last week? Was it this morning? Whenever Yahweh passed through the pieces, and Abraham was put into a sleep, he didn't let Abraham pass between the pieces because he knew that his people would break the covenant. Okay, so that's the same thing that happens here. Yahweh has always been the one to pass through the pieces. He's going to make the covenant work because he has entered into covenant with by his own name, and there's no other name greater. So he's bound in covenant to us. He's bound. Okay. So, in short, what is that telling us? That syncretism can be overcome, and it can also be forgiven through sacrifice, turning to Yahweh, and seeking the marriage covenant once again. Pretty simple. This Hebrew word tells us what causes nakedness stemming from syncretic worship. When we gain knowledge from another head concerning connecting us to another revelation. In those ancient Hebrew letters, each letter means something. And so when we get involved with syncretic worship, what happened to Adam and Hava was another head planted seed and connected her to a revelation she was not supposed to know about. Welcome to the world of our mind. Welcome to the world of us worshiping Yahweh and deprogramming syncretism from our thought process. Amen. These are deep things, but nevertheless, there is simplicity again in the complexity of Yahweh's word. And you can see that same exact thing in Romans 1, 22 through 32. Would somebody want to read that? Let's have somebody read that passage, please. Now again, remember that if we're going to be teaching something that's coming from the Old Testament, we really want to validate this in the New Testament. And again, brother, do you have it? Let's hear Romans chapter 1, verses 22 to 32.
Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the magnificence of the uncorruptible Elohim into an image made like to corruptible man, and to birds, and four-footed beasts, and creeping things. Wherefore Elohim also gave them up to uncleanness, through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of Elohim into a lie, and worshipped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen.
You see this? He's explaining what happened in Mount Sinai when they exposed themselves. How was it? Through the implanting of another seed that came from another head, the same thing that happened in the Garden of Eden.
For this cause Elohim gave them up to vile affections, or even their women. Even their women did change the natural use into that which is against nature. And likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their own their lust one toward another, men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves that recompense of their error, which was fit. And even as they did not like to retain Elohim in their knowledge, Elohim gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things which are not fit, being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, whisperers, backbiters, haters of Yahweh, despiteful, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, without understanding, covenant breakers, without natural affection, implacable, unmerciful, who knowing the judgment of Elohim, that they which commit such things are worthy of death, not only to do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them.
He's dealing with the same exact problem in the New Testament. That's exactly what took place at Mount Sinai. It's exactly what took place in the garden. And it's exactly what caused them to be kicked out of the land again. AD 70, when they tore down that temple, it got bad for a bunch of our brothers and sisters. People are dying and being killed because we refuse to purge the evil and the syncretic type of theology from our midst. There are lives at stake. But you know what this does show us? How much Yahshua truly did love us.
Hallelujah.
How much he truly did love us. How much favor and grace he really has bestowed upon us. Because you know what? He had the right to kill us. But instead, he buried us with him through Yahshua. You know, for him to even show us that type of favor in the state of being that we were in is the type of love I'll never be able to understand until I look him in the eye. Until we look him in the eye. But we've got to understand that we must identify what syncretism is in the eyes of Yahweh and purge it from our minds, our hearts, and from the body of Yahshua. Now, we're going to read 1 Kings 22, 1 through 8. And the context of this passage is critical in having scriptural proof that syncretism will not be honored by a true worshiper of our Melchizedek. This is a good one. Praise Yah. 1 Kings 22. One through 8. Now, I want to kind of pave the way here because a lot of our Sacred Name Bibles have fixed this. But in the King James, it just says L-O-R-D all the way through. Okay, and what we see here is a king from the southern kingdom comes up to the king of the northern kingdom and says, hey, we're losing Gilead. We're losing the promised land. What are we going to do about it? And he says, well, will you go to war with me and take it back? And he says, do you have a prophet? You really can't see this message in a King James Bible or an English Bible other than a Sacred Name Bible that's corrected it. Even in the scriptures, they have it wrong because they should have left it Adonai in one spot. Okay, what is taking place is, let's go ahead and read that. And they continued 3 years without fighting between Aram and Israel. And it came to be in the 3rd year that Jehoshaphat, sovereign of Yehudah, came down to the sovereign of Israel. And the sovereign of Israel said to his servants, do you know that Ramoth in Gilead is ours, and we are keeping silent from taking it out of the hand of the sovereign of Aram? And he said to Jehoshaphat, do you go with me to battle at Ramoth Gilead? And Jehoshaphat said to the sovereign of Israel, I am as you are, my people as your people, my horses as your horses. He says, we're brothers. We're living in the same inheritance given by the same king. You know what? I've got your back. But we first must seek, before we go to war, before we do anything, we got to search out whether we should do this through a prophet. Jehoshaphat said to the sovereign of Israel, please first inquire for the word of Yahweh. And the sovereign of Israel gathered the prophets, about 400 men, and said to them, do I go against Ramoth Gilead to battle, or do I refrain? And they said, go up, for Yahweh. Now, what we did is some of the early pioneers caught on to this word Adonai, where it had been replaced like 132 to 4 times that it replaced the Tetragrammaton. So what they did was they just went back and put Yahweh back in the scripture. But this is one instance whenever they should not have. Because watch what happens. It says, and they said, go up for, and even in the scriptures it says Yahweh does give it unto the hand of the sovereign. But listen what verse 7 says. Jehoshaphat said, is there not a prophet of Yahweh beside, what? They brought 400 prophets of Adonai, Adonis, and he inquired through them whether they should go to war. And this king said, hold on a minute, brother, that's what's got you in trouble to begin with. Do you not have a prophet of Yahweh in this land? He said, you're getting some credit on me. You've got different prophets in here. Where's the prophets of Yahweh? No wonder you're losing the inheritance. Do you understand what's happening? It takes one king to change one little band of a legion of someone who is not dedicated to Yahweh for you to begin what? Losing the inheritance. Jehoshaphat caught on to that immediately, and in verse 7 he said, is there not here a prophet of Yahweh besides, that we might inquire of him? And the sovereign of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, there is still one man, Micaiah, son of Yimlah, to inquire of Yahweh by him, but I hate him. Yeah. See, so this is very clear that the other prophets were not prophets of Yahweh.
Amen.
You hear this? Yeah. It's very clear that he said, no. Those guys are what is causing you to lose the ground. We're trying to gain it back. Don't you have a prophet of Yahweh here? And a prophet of Yahweh had recognized that this king was bringing in syncretic worship, and he wasn't speaking good things about it. So should we not warn our children who are supposed to be raised up and their knees never bow to Baal? On what to keep an eye out for before they go into the inheritance so they don't lose it? Security in this message. There is security of Yahweh's people in this message. We need to go in and we need to We need to conquer with Yahshua. We need to stay in the land with Yahshua. Anything that's syncretic is not going in with Yahshua. It's pretty simply put. He said, yes, there is still one man there in verse 8, Micaiah of Yimlah, to inquire of Yahweh by him, but I hate him because he does not prophesy good concerning me, but evil. And Jehoshaphat said, let not the sovereign say so. You see, he immediately took up for the man of Yahweh. He said, watch your mouth. That's what's got you in trouble. You're speaking against the prophets of Yah. You speak against the prophets of Yah, and what Yahweh is saying through the prophets to you, well, of course you're going to start losing the battle. So here we see a scriptural testimony where syncretism is what caused the northern 10 tribes to start losing ground, and then later on, also Yehuda was taken away with the same type of crookedness. They all got thrown out of the land. They all lost the inheritance. Now, I want to cover that Adonai thing because, again, you really have to know how to spot these things. Actually, somebody else showed me this. But it was a great revelation. I praise Yahweh for it. There it is, the Greek. The pronunciation there we see Adonis was a borrowing from the Semitic word Adon, meaning, they say Lord, which is related to Adonai, one of the names used to refer to the God of the Hebrew Bible and still used in Judaism to the present day. Red flag number 2.
Yeah.
Syrian Adonis, what? Goes right back to Syria. Syrian Adonis is Gauss, Eos, akin to the Egyptian Osiris, and Semitic Tammuz, and Baal-Hadad, and the Estrakin, Tunis, and the Phrygian, that's how you actually say that, Attis, all of whom are deities of rebirth and vegetation. I had looked for, I had read some sacred name material while I was incarcerated, and they said that Adonis was connected to a deity, but they didn't give a whole bunch of information. And I contacted elders all over the place saying, where can we get more concrete evidence that that's true? Because somebody asked me, well, how do you prove that? And boy, I dug and dug and dug, and finally I found this information. It's actually on social media. You can find it by Googling. But that'll be gone soon too.
Right.
Just so you know. Because they want us to be syncretic. This world is looking for a one world body religiously. It is. The instruction of true worship is right here in Deuteronomy chapter 6. Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad. Hear, O Yisrael, Yahweh Elohim, Yahweh is one. And you shall love Yahweh, your Elohim, with all of your heart, with all of your being, all of your might, all of your stuff, everyone. With everything you have. We must first love Him and keep ourselves unspotted from sin. Matthew chapter 4, verse 8 through 11. And this is the key. This is how we fight it all off. We stop the seeds of someone's words at the door if we recognize that it might not line up with what Yahweh taught through His Devarim, through His words. Stop it at the door and test it. Again, the devil took him up on a very high mountain and showed him all the reigns of the world and their esteem, and said to him, now remember, Yahweh tells everybody to go into the land. He says we're going to dispossess them, and you're not going to worship me the way they worship their mighty ones. And as long as you love me, and as long as you follow my commands, you'll remain in that land. And they didn't. Right? So where did the authority fall into? Who became the master of all the nations in this world? The adversary. So here it is. That is the outcome of our syncretism. We handed the authority that Yahweh has given us over to the adversary. Just like it happened in the Garden of Eden. Showed him all the reigns of the world and their esteem, and said to him, all these I shall give you if you fall down and worship me. Then Yahshua said to him, go, Satan, for it has been written, you shall worship Yahweh your Elohim, and him alone you shall serve. When you fight the enemy off, or seeds of demonic impressions, if you stop them here and test them with the word that was spoken to us from the very beginning, and you don't allow it into your mind, you will not be watering the syncretic seed that is within you. You test it with the original seed that is growing within us as we have come into the body of Yahshua and begin to study the Torah once again. So we're watering the good seed. And as long as we water that and we root up all of these roots of bitterness that the Word talks about out of our hearts and our minds, then the inner man grows stronger than the outer man, and we know when to stop words that may be deceitful from coming into our mind. And we stop it where Hava failed to stop it.
Hallelujah.
Look at what it cost. Fought him off with the word, and look what happened. Then the devil left him, and see, then Yahweh's going to send messengers to come and attend to you, to strengthen you. This coward had attacked first the female of the situation in the garden. You know, I see a lot of our sisters going through things on their own these days, and I see the adversary just constantly slapping away at them and beating them up with their own family. And I'm like, why don't you come pick on me? If he wants a fight, why doesn't he come and pick on somebody that can fight back and stand on it? If you're not saying that the women can't fight back, don't get me wrong. Some women can fight better than men. But I'm saying the strength of a man and a woman, or even in headship, if you're a woman that lives alone and you have people around you in the body and is submitted to the headship of Yahshua, that will strengthen you. You'll fight off the enemy with the word, and Yahweh will send messengers to help attend to you when all the smoke is cleared. But don't let that syncretic thing that's within us be watered by any means. The conclusion of the matter. Give Yahweh the glory due his name. Worship him in the beauty of holiness. That's what failed in the garden. Through both man and woman. It's not just the woman's fault. The man failed too. He should have said, whoa, honey, don't take this the wrong way, but you're looking a little different. I don't know exactly what happened, but we need to get Yahweh here so he can fix this. But he didn't do that. So, again, the purpose for this whole teaching is to bring forth the historical elements behind syncretism, the defining syncretism, as well as showing that there has been a problem with syncretic worship throughout time between Yahweh and his people, and it has stopped them dead in their tracks from going into the kingdom or either staying in the kingdom. So again, I propose the question, is it not as important for us to teach our children what is not allowed in the kingdom as it is to teach them about the faith and the grace and the love of Messiah. It is. It is just as important to teach them. We need to know that, it is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of a living Elohim. But we also need to teach them He loved you so much that He's willing to help correct that thing inside of you in order that you can take on the form of a bride once again. To be acceptable in His sight. And as a matter of fact, the Apostle Paul says, that I can lift you up to Him as a chaste virgin, which we lost at Mount Sinai, correct? He knew these concepts. He knew it. He knew that we were going to be able to be presented in the body of Messiah as a chaste virgin once again. But Yahshua provided the blood of the covenant. The consummation of the marriage is the blood. And therefore, I want to explain that again. We were talking about it last night. In a marriage ketubah, Hebraically, or Eastern customary practices, but mainly Hebraically, you had normally it would happen as, well, you send a messenger from the family and goes to the other family, and that messenger says, here's a proposal. We're going to have a marriage proposal for you between this is the husband, this is the bride. This is what we have to offer. Is this doable? And they would go back and they would say, sure, okay. And that's what happened in Mount Sinai. Everything that Yahweh has said, we shall do and obey. The marriage covenant the proposal was accepted, and both parties were like, okay, we're going to do this. But then before Moshe came down with the signed marriage contract, possibly even a copy for both parties, something happened. And we could not be presented a chaste virgin any longer. We couldn't wait 40 days. Couldn't wait 40 days. So he fasted 40 days. See what I mean? So he pulled that end of the covenant, and he provided the blood of the covenant, because the witnesses after the marriage proposal and the marriage ketubah was done, and the whole wedding had taken place, then the two would go into the marriage chambers and they would consummate the marriage, and a witness from both sides of the family would see that there was blood, and it ordained that yes, she was a maiden. Well, but that couldn't happen because of what we did, so Yahshua provided the blood that says we have consummated the marriage. Just like he wouldn't let Abraham pass through the pieces, there's the same reasoning behind it all throughout Scripture. Hallelujah. So, again, I just want to thank you so very much for letting me stand up here for hours and just to bring Yahweh's word. I want to thank you for being here today. I want to thank Elder Graham for making it possible for me to be here to bring the word to you guys today, for letting me get up here and speak. And may Yahweh bless each and every one of you. And you have a good evening. And it was great to see each and every one of you.
Tell us what's going on in your town now, in the assembly there.
In the assembly in Idaho?
Yeah.
It's not snowing, so that's good.
Wow.
Right? Well, social media-wise, we have, it's got to the point to where it's almost uncontrollable. I have so many messages coming in that I can't even answer them all anymore. But which is heartbreaking to me, because I was really close. In the beginning, I always make sure that, my phone stays on, but it's got to the point where sometimes I have to shut it off at night because my wife and the baby and everything. But I normally leave it on because I want to hear from the people. So from a social media aspect, it's really booming. The teachings are going through several different social media avenues. Live streaming every Friday night, and usually on Shabbat. But we have a program called Friday Night Live, Restoring the Hebrew Mind. And we do exactly what we're doing here, and I answer questions that are sent in by the people who watch. I've got a stack of questions, and usually what we do is we take it to the Hebrew and try to provide answers where, have you ever, again, heard like pastors and other people sit around in a room year after year, never coming to any solid conclusions of what a passage may mean? Well, that's because we're not looking at it from a Hebrew perspective many times. And to look at the Hebrew really brings clarity to it. For instance, like in the King James it says, and the LORD said to my LORD, sit at my right hand until I make thy enemies thy footstool. Well, you got LORD and LORD, and I've heard pastors argue over that for years. But then when I looked at it in the Hebrew, I just went, oh, okay. So Yahweh said unto my master, and master is the one who buys you. Very easy to understand. So that's what we do with these questions that are sent in, and they're normally in the New Testament. People can't understand how we link these passages to something in the Torah. And that's where the Hebrew actually comes in. I have the Hebrew New Testament, so I'm able to make connections that way. So we're really pressing forward in making connections from the Old Testament to the New Testament and doing it by way of Hebrew word studies, even from the New Testament, because now we have books, again, like the older elders didn't have. We have what they call the Apostolic Bible Polyglot, which is a complete Greek Bible now. The Septuagint, all of the Old Testament and the New Testament, coded to the Strong's Greek numbers. So what we can do is we can say, well, in the New Testament, this English word is that Greek word. Then you find where that Greek word was used in the Septuagint, and then you find out that passage is what? In your Strong's, and you can look up the Hebrew word, so then you can go, this English word is that Greek word, and this Greek word is that Hebrew word. This is the word they more than likely used when they wrote that passage. So we're getting closer and closer to bringing more and more clarity to the New Testament and connecting it directly to the Torah through that book. So we have that, and sometimes we have the Sabbath service live during the winter. Not so much, because it's hard for me to heat that whole building with wood heat. And once I do get it warm, what happens, brother?
It's too hot.
People are opening the windows in there, So that's what we have going on. We have people actually moving to the area from Alaska. We just had Brother Leonard, who was an ex-Vietnam vet, move there. And he had gone up there to kind of escape. Vietnam had him messed up. He's 72 years old. He came for Passover and got baptized, and he said he wanted me to start keeping an eye out for a place that was close to the assembly. Then the place right next door came up for sale not long after that, so he moved in next door. Couldn't get any closer than that. And so we've got good things happening there, and all to the honor and the praise and glory of Yahweh. Again,
is there a vein that you can see if people ask a question? Or is it just sporadic?
Normally they send in the questions. What I did was social media got pretty ugly. And I don't want to get into all of the unnecessary reasons behind it, but people can get ugly. And so I shut down all the chats. Everyone. But my phone line is open, and I also give out the email will pop up, and the phone number pops up during the program, so that people can call and leave a message, text while I'm live, or send an email, and we'll answer it the following week. We're doing it that way right now until the dust clears, and we can get more control over who can say things on the chat forum. Because again, it gets pretty crazy. Almost all of the Sacred Name Assemblies have disabled their chat section or comment sections on all of their videos. So I was probably, I would think, one of the first ones to do it. But yeah, I really want to get a different platform going, but we don't have the internet power that we really need to get a good system in. And when we do actually get fiber ran to the building, we will be going solo. And that means we'll be broadcasting through our own broadcasting on social media. And then we can open up everything because everybody has to be logged in through us to comment. They have to actually be part of the group. And once we get that capability, then we'll get back to answering things online. We've already got a beautiful program if I can ever use it in totality. I mean, very professional stuff, like you can see me and you can see the guy who's answering the calls, and we can have callers call in online. I have all those capabilities, we just don't have the power. I forget what it's called.
Server.
Yeah, our server doesn't give enough gigabytes, what is it? What is it? Yeah, we don't have enough power, bandwidth. We don't have enough bandwidth yet to run that program. So right now I'm going through my computer into Vimeo, from Vimeo to LinkedIn, YouTube, all the other Facebook and all the other social media platforms. And I mean, you can really get lost in the shuffle there. So you may be watching through Vimeo, and there might be only 6 people watching. You go, well, this guy's a dud. But if you go to the YouTube, then there's 100, or to what's another, Twitter. So we're actually hitting a lot of different social media outlets, and we're gaining a lot of momentum in that respect. But during the feasts is when we really get a lot of people who make the trip.
You see the feasts are increasing.
Oh yeah, and you know, I've been noticing a push towards the study of the ancient Hebrew, which makes me excited, because a lot of people that I know that are teachers, they stick with more of a Jewish perspective, and they'll say that, well, the ancient Hebrew really can't be proven. It could be Phoenician or this or that, which we just came across some evidence not long ago that totally disproves the theory that the hieroglyphics are of Phoenician sources. Right. And as a matter of fact, if you watch Patterns of Evidence, the Moses Conspiracy, it has a modern day rabbi. And boy, this guy, he got in trouble. He said, I don't care what rabbi tells you what. That is ancient Semitic language, and I can read it. We're talking about the hieroglyphics, what we were looking at just a moment ago. And so a lot of these rabbis are starting to come out and say, actually, not Phoenician. But, you know, they're getting discredited by the rabbinical world when they do come out and make these statements. They're being discredited and, in many cases, even being booted from synagogues. So, yeah, which is not a bad thing, probably. But again, if there's any questions or comments that anybody would like to ask me before I come down.
Have you had a chance to look over?
Can't hear you.
Have you had a chance to look over Jeff Benner's mechanical translation yet?
And if, Hi, Anna Marie from Allen Park, Michigan. Have you had a chance to look at Jeff Benner's mechanical translation? And if so, what do you think?
I think that Jeff has done a very good work in the mechanical translation. Again, anybody who knows modern Hebrew and knows all 3 forms of Hebrew, hieroglyphic and the middle form, which we would refer to as Paleo, anybody who's put in as much time as that man has in archaeology, anthropology, and all of these ologies that we have to look into before we discredit anything, my hat's off to him for that. I think that it is a work worthy of studying, absolutely. Does it change a few things here and there? Yes. Drastically? Yes. But again, we have to understand, you know, if I was to get up here and say, I can teach you all the ancient Hebrew there is to know, I'd be a liar. Because ancient Hebrew is definitely not the block form letters. Those are Aramaic letters that they picked up while they were in Babylon. So we have a lot of Aramaic influence, especially with the vowel point system that's added later on by when they were coming back into the land. I forget what time it was. I had the dates and times on one of our programs not long ago of when and how the vowel point system was brought into the whole language. And there was already several different types of vowel point systems being used. So it wasn't just this, hey, we're going to add this. It was, they kind of went with the majority rules on that when they added the vowel point system. But I would say that yes, it is worthy of study. He's got some great stuff in there. There's him and several other people that are researching and pushing forward in the study of all this. And his mechanical translation is a product of that. Anybody else?
Praise God. Couple, just mostly a little statement, I'll be a little short here. So, how great is the deception in the last days? I can start with that and finish that question, answer that. The names have been changed to protect the guilty. Is that what has been changed? Let me see. No Easter bunny forgave me of my sins, neither did Santa Claus. And be aware that good sister gave me that idea. One world music you might look into. That's what I've been noticing. Besides, Catholic Church is pretty rough, and the daughters of the Catholic Church, right. The Protestants, and a renewed covenant or old covenant. Anyhow, how great is the deception in the last days?
Well, simply put, we have a couple of different scriptures that we can refer to. It says that it's going to be so great that even the very elect can be deceived. So we're not talking about something that, this is why, brother, I try to at least 2 or 3 times a year bring some type of teaching like this that is very deep and to the point and with the best accuracy that I can propose to the body, because the deception is right before our very face on a daily basis. If we are the elect, and it says that the very elect can be deceived, then it's got to be because the elect is allowing it to happen. They're not intentionally. Now, deception is this. If I knew I was going to be deceived, I would stop it. The Word told me that we were going to be deceived. I'm trying to stop that. Right? So the deception is to the point to where it's even, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm saying all of the men of Yahweh that are bringing forth the message is the source of it. What I'm saying is, a lot of times we are failing, in my opinion, even myself, we're failing to really bring forth some of these things that we really know that we need to bring. We'll kind of procrastinate on certain topics because we don't want to offend. And believe me, like I said, it's never my intention to offend, but to defend. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm just saying scripturally we know that the deception is even in the body. We have to face that. And that doesn't mean that me and Elder Graham are part of a deception, or that any of the other elders are. What it is that if we knew we were being deceived, we would stop it. And that's what we need to begin to focus on as we're getting further and further into the last days, is dig into this stuff and every now and then come out with a message. Okay, today's maintenance time. And bring forth a message that will allow us to go, ooh, there's a couple of areas I haven't really thought about cleaning up. Right? Because we're supposed to be cleansed. The bride has prepared herself, correct? So it's not all just the blood of Yahshua. It says the bride prepared herself. And back then, in those days, a bride, before she was brought to the altar, oh, she was taken care of. She was bathed in oils and really pampered and nurtured. And I think that cleansing process is something that we really need to focus on as we begin to get closer and closer to what's going to evolve into something. He said it's going to come as a thief in the night. So just when we think things are looking bad, boom, it could happen right then. Faster than your thought that it could get bad, it got bad. So I'm saying that the deception is already within. It's not something that has to fight itself into us. It's something that we're trying to purge, like I was saying earlier, from within us, get it out of the body, to deprogram us. And it's up to the elders and the headship and the way the families are ran and where you choose to fellowship also has something to do with it. Because if you're in a place of worship on Shabbat and during the feast where there's just this hodgepodge of, anything goes, where you're really not gaining any foot ground in that type of environment either. It needs to be well constructed. Like whenever you come here for the Unity Conference, whenever you come here for the feast, they have a program that's been very well thought out, and they try to stick to that program very, very closely. It's structure. Yahweh's about structure. He really is. And if you are attending home fellowships, then there should be headship and structure there as well. There needs to be some level of accountability. Not every wind of doctrine passing through, and we're watching Nehemiah Gordon on. I've already told everybody how I feel about that man. He's already took down Michael Root. Anyway, so it's about, it's about where you're at and what you're letting come into. You don't want your children being exposed to this stuff. Man, you want the babies to hear the truth. Yahshua said, bring the babies to me. Bring them to me. Praise Yah. Was there one other question?
One more.
Did you say?
No,
Did I answer that? So yeah, the deception is very great, and it's already been here. It's how much of it can we purge before he returns that really counts. Hallelujah. Right. All right. Again, I want to thank everybody. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Teddy.
You're welcome.
God bless you. Philippians 4, we'll finish up here. Rejoice in Yahweh always, and again I say rejoice. Let your moderation be known unto all men. The sovereign is at hand. Be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto Elohim. And the peace of Elohim, which passes all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through the Messiah, Yahshua. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, take some digging sometimes, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things of a good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. Hallelujah. So that's what we have to do. Think on these things. Somebody's already voiced that they need a couple hours to get home, so let's stand, be dismissed, and what a day, what a Sabbath day. Usually we're not here till this late, but on Sabbath, but we're here. So everyone that came, thank you for Teddy coming, thank you for the baptism last night, thank you for your Ruach today. Yahweh has anointed these different ones. Father, keep us under the hollow of your hand, that Yahshua's blood, remember that we're under his blood covering. And also, Father, let your Holy Spirit reign in our lives every day, 365 days of the year, Father. Keep us. We're yours, Father. We know that we are yours. Hallelujah. And you are ours and of mine. Hallelujah. Father, thank you. These things we ask in Yahshua's name. Take us home safely. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.